Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. I am your co-host, Kenton. With me is your other co-host,
Jason, what's going on?
and so just a reminder, once again, for probably the umpteenth time, and you're probably sick of hearing this, we're not going to be talking about the production or the reception of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. We feel like there are other websites and other resources out there that do a better job of that. What we are doing specifically here for the Daikaiju Fest when it comes to celebrating the anniversaries of these movies is we're just celebrating them. We're celebrating the wonderfulness that most of these movies are. Not every film is treated equally, of course, and just kind of talking about its impact, if any, throughout the sagas, throughout the kaiju genre, or in this case, the Godzilla saga, because it's a Godzilla film, it's a Gamera film, etc. I think you get the point. So, Jason, you want to get us started on 30 years of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah?
Well, since I'm wearing this shirt, might as well have us talk about it. And I know you have sort of mixed feelings about this film, unfortunately. Um, yeah, like our the first time seeing this, it was both of us. It was right around 1998, uh, when uh, when we first came up here to the Twin Cities, which is where I currently reside now, and that was also the same year when the American version, the '98 Godzilla movie, came
Happy
out,
23 years, by the way.
and yeah, basically this month. Um, so as of this recording, by the way, uh, yeah, and that was right around the time when there was a bunch of Godzilla shit going on. With the figurines of, the American version, and then you had a lot of the VHS releases. Yes, VHS right
Huh?
around that time.
What's
where
that?
where a lot of the Heisei movies came out basically
And he had
right
some of the
around that
Showa
same
films
time.
too.
Yeah, but most of them were, the Heisei films at that time, because that was a um, 3 years after Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and then that was when the Heisei era came to a close at that time, and none of those movies really came out in the States right up until the American Godzilla film released right in '98, and and I know that we had like a heyday with all this stuff. And one of the movies that we picked up, and I think it was at the Suncoast, at the time when it was over at
It was a
Mall of
Suncoast at
America.
Mall of America. Yep.
Yeah, and I spotted the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah VHS tape. It's like, I'm getting this sucker.
Well, and then I spotted the Godzilla versus Mothra, the '92
hmm
film.
Yeah, and I remember when we were traveling over to
There was Destroy All
Wabasha.
Monsters. We were like,
That that
Destroy All
too,
Monsters, and then we saw it and we're like,
that too, and then I remember looking at the box art for Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah on our way over to Wabasha, Minnesota at that time, where we stayed, I think, a day or two over there, and then fast forward, and I think I'm not sure it. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah was one of the first films that we
it
seen
was
when
definitely
when
one
we
of the
got
first.
yeah,
Yes.
when we got back home from vacation from the Twin Cities there. And and I remember when it was our first viewing, I I really enjoyed it at the time, and I think I was 12 then in '98. But then over the years, I think it's sort of gotten a little bit more obscure as far as when we get older, how the story goes with the character, and as well as some, of the kaiju battle and everything. Granted, the kaiju battle in this one is pretty good in its own right, but as far as the human side of the story, that's sort of a bit different. It's like You're coming off of a 2-year hiatus from probably one of the more realistic Godzilla films as far as Godzilla 1985, and then recent up to that time was Godzilla vs. Biollante, and then you get this sort of obscure uh movie in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah where you have people coming from the future in a like this flying time machine, and then you happen to go back in time to like World War II era, and then seeing a young, uh, like form of Godzilla in his dinosaur form.
Godzilla source.
Yeah, Godzilla source, and then you have these Dorats, which fortunately, eventually turn into King Ghidorah, where they plant them in this one island. I
Lagos
don't
Island.
Autos was it Autos Island?
Lagos.
Agos.
Lagos.
Um, and then they relocate Godzilla's source elsewhere after he gets injured by the American soldiers and everything. It's yeah, the story,
You want to talk about some plot holes.
but the more shocking part of it is that you're coming off of a 2-year hiatus of one of the more believable films as far as
And what the Japanese considered
84
to be the best Godzilla
yeah,
film. In
84 and
2012,
then
anyways.
84 and then Godzilla vs. Biollante, and then you get this.
Yeah, you
It's
get this.
it's sort of kind of a bizarre entry, probably one of the other bizarre entries along with Godzilla vs. Hedorah.
Yeah. Longtime listeners of this podcast know that I am not that big of a fan on this film. Um, I will say this, like Jason, I think the kaiju stuff in this film is very good. It is some of the
Mm-hmm.
best within the Heisei era. But everything else that surrounds it is really whiplash inducing and also a jumbled heaping mess.
And I probably would
Um,
say a bit jarring.
it is well, that's why I'm saying whiplash inducing. Um, because like you were talking about, you have the Return of Godzilla, and then you have Godzilla versus Biollante, and then you get this. Typically, when you have a saga that starts transforming into goofiness, it usually is gradual. Like you can start seeing the steps with each
Mm-hmm.
entry. That doesn't happen when you start the Millennium era. With the
No,
Millennium, not the Millennium, the Heisei
Heisei.
era. With the Heisei era, you get serious, maybe ever so slightly goofy, but still pretty serious to oh my god, what the hell? And and one of the things that always sort of disturbs me about this film is the fan reception to this, because it seems like a lot of fans will acknowledge that the story of this film is a complete and absolute Swiss cheese fest with all the holes. It's a mess. And I understand that a lot of people will say, well, look, you're talking about a movie with a giant three-headed dragon and a giant reptile. It's like, okay, yes, that is true. The suspension of disbelief can only go so far, though. And the fact that people are willing to give the story on this film a huge pass for its story, but then somehow criticize the story of other films that do a better job of telling a more coherent and cohesive story. Let's say, for example, either Mechagodzilla 2 or Destroya. Um, I find to be absolutely head scratching, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because this film, like I said, it's just a heaping mess. Is it entertaining? Like if I turn my brain off and just take it for what it is, it's a stupid good time. It really is. But when I sit down and
I can be
and
right there.
actively pay attention to it, it's it's head hurting, and just in its presentation as well. It doesn't look as good as the previous two films that came before it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that had something to do with the budget or what. But the reason why we got to this point with King Ghidorah was the fact that you had a dark film in Return of Godzilla. Then you had the
Pseudo
director of
dark.
Biollante, who was more or less given the free reign to do whatever he wanted. And then after the film was a moderate success, but not as quite the success as Toho had hoped for, they said, "All right, we got to rein it in. We're going to get involved more in the production of the next batch of films." And on top of that, too, the director cannot do exactly as he wants, and we're bringing back older, more familiar foes for Godzilla to fight because that's the problem. It's not so
And
much the fact that know.
yeah, and then that's the problem, and we've discussed this before as far as when Toho tries to, try to give the director a little bit more free reign, but then once they get the results, it's like, oh fuck, we gotta take shit over here, and that's sort of that's
Imagining them in the executive office.
and then once they try to get a grip on micromanage everything, that's sort of the I think the mistake that they you know go into is they try to boss everything around or try to give orders, eh, as far as maybe the story and also the foes that they trying to bring in and everything else. That could be sort of the downfall of particular sort of particular movies, such good example, the one that we're talking about now.
Yes, and I think yes and no. I think there are some cases in which it works pretty well. Like I would argue Mechagodzilla 2, it works fairly well. Because I would consider that to be one of the better entries within the Heisei era, and probably top 10 or 15 of the overall Godzilla saga. Um,
Maybe when they
it's
have
just that,
maybe if they have a cooler head, yes, I think that's probably when it gets to that point. Maybe if they have a cooler head, maybe sort of balance things out. But then when they like are in a desperate mode, which in my
right.
opinion, which I think after the fact, when they got the results in from Biolani, I think they went in sort of the desperate oh shit mode
See,
with
yeah, you
this.
brought up something that I was just about to say, whereas this film reeks of desperation. They are quickly trying to salvage something in which they felt like they are on the cusp of losing again, which really just isn't true. The fact that maybe it didn't even cross their mind that, look, Godzilla may have been a product of his time, meaning that the Showa era films did by and large pretty well till you got about late-ish 60s on into the 70s. Much more kiddie fare, still not necessarily doing well. Budgets obviously are much smaller. They try to bring them back. Return of Godzilla does fairly well. Then Biollante doesn't quite do as well as they had hoped. Maybe it doesn't, the fact that enough time at that point had changed, the fact that pop culture, not just in Japan, but even the United States had changed, and some of that was being imported in Japan at that time. And the
Mhm.
fact that you have the Japanese people starting to incorporate that into their own personal lives as their own form of entertainment as well. The fact that maybe it didn't cross their minds that the the days of producing a Godzilla film each and every year and having it be maybe at best a moderate success or whatever are done. Times change.
Mhm.
You know, like you compare today with what it was like in 1964, there's so much more crap. I mean, first and foremost, TV is everywhere now. And on top of that, too, you got streaming services, movie theaters when they're in operation are a big deal
Smartphones.
again. Yeah, there's just so many other properties out there as well for people to create a fandom around, to grab more attention to. And I think that's definitely part of it. People will only go so far and have so much money, time, and attention to devote to certain things that maybe, hey, we cannot produce 15 more movies out of this year after year for the next 15 to 16 years, those days are done. And this film definitely reeks of desperation because a familiar foe in King Ghidorah, you're bringing in like time travel, which up to this point had never been done before in the Godzilla saga. But in a way, it's sort of in Toho's own way, bringing in kind of a quote unquote space element, even though it's not technically space.
Hmm.
It's bringing that more classical sci fi element into play, where after a couple of movies that are slightly more grounded in reality, it would be one thing if Godzilla versus King Ghidorah was like the fourth, fifth, sixth entry in the Heisei era. Then you'd be like, I understand why this movie is batshit crazy at this point because it was a gradual, progression.
Yeah,
That's not true. It's they got desperate and this is what became of it, and then you start to even see the director of this film is no longer a director of any more Godzilla films after this, and instead what you get more from here on out, at least within the Heisei era, are more balanced, maybe some people would argue blander, safer Godzilla films.
hmm,
And it has become even more reined in because you don't necessarily have the entire batshit crazy stuff that is happening in this film continue into the subsequent sequels.
yeah, and like you said, that with the first two films, 84 and Baialane, where they were more grounded. Yeah, you can definitely see that desperation where they bring in that whole time travel element, and that just is just like really pulling something out of your ass at that time, because like you get two movies that are grounded, and then all of a sudden you bring in an element that's just like it feels like you're just throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Well, and just none of it makes sense again when you sit down to think about it. They try to, replace Godzilla with the Dorats, but then they go back into time and yet everybody still knows who Godzilla is. It's like, no,
Right.
that's not how it
or
works.
or at
And
least like the CEO of that one company who was at the time,
Yoshio Tsuchiya, played by Yoshio Tsuchiya.
yeah, who was a soldier at the time when they saw him. At least he sort of recognizes the Godzilla then. But yeah, you get some of the characters that never traveled back into time, but then yet they still know who Godzilla was.
Yeah, like the whole space-time continuum should have been completely altered.
Or rewritten.
History as we know it should have been drastically different. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem I have. It's like, okay, I'm willing to go so far as you to give me a radioactive lizard that breathes atomic fire and a three-headed dragon that shoots out lightning bolts. I'm willing to kind of go with you on the time travel thing if you do it at least halfway decently, but you don't. You it's a very lazy attempt. It's very lazy in that it just seems like they never really put any thought into this. And I understand Toho's um, timetable of producing Godzilla films is very short. I understand that maybe they didn't have time to go through with it, but at the same time, I truly do believe there was enough time to where you could have hashed out the story and then had one or two people go over and be like, okay, this is what we got to fix.
Well,
And
and
that did
then
not happen.
Well, and then the thing is, too, they did actually have time between Baialane and then up to its release in
Right.
'91, because Baialane was released in '89, whereas this movie was released in December 14th of '91. So they
Well,
had at least 2 years to come up with
well, it's
something.
not like this movie was in pre-production for 2 years, though. That's not the case. I
Oh,
think the movie
yeah,
was only in pre-production for X number of months. But
right.
um,
Right, and but they still at least had plenty of time to try to flesh out at least a good story
yeah,
during that time period right up
yeah.
to the release.
And I'm willing to go with crazy and just nuts as long as you can give me a good fun time. And I love, again, like I said, I love the kaiju scenes. I think the kaiju scenes are very well done and some of the
Hmm.
best that we see in the Heisei era. the human story, and then kind of once again, when you start getting into the whole messing with the space time continuum, that's just kind of where everything goes nuts. And um, that's just my problem. I want to let's quickly just get the negatives out of the way here, and we kind of more or less have been doing that anyways. But let's really just kind of burn through the negatives, and then kind of end this more on a positive note by talking more of the kaiju stuff near the end. But I don't think the I'm sorry, I don't think the acting is necessarily all that good in this film. I hate to say it, and I know a lot of people out there disagree with me on that. I think it is, if you were to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being exceptional, to me, it hovers between a 4 and a 5. It hovers between subpar to being just enough to.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't say it's not good. I would at least say it's okay. And yeah, I probably would give the rating on the acting parts sort of right around that neighborhood for me, maybe at least a 4.5. And then maybe say uh, 5.5 at best. But yeah,
It
so
doesn't help though that the characters aren't well written either.
I would
They
at
just
least
they
I would
aren't
at
great
least
characters.
I would at least say Miki Sagusa in this one, I think for me is probably the best one out of
She is, but
this
she is
whole.
so much like a third stringer in this particular film. Terasawa is okay. Emmy is okay. Everyone else, though, not so. And Mickey's good, but everyone else,
And then
not so much. And I
and
hate to
then
say
I
that
probably would at least
for obvious
say
reasons.
Yoshio Tetsuya was probably pretty good in this one too.
Well, yeah, and but again though too, he's not in the film enough. You know, if he was the main actor, I probably would feel differently about it. I'd be like, yeah, the story's still ridiculous, but his acting and his ability to carry
And
something in which there's not a whole lot there, I mean, good acting can turn something from bad into at least something decent,
yeah.
but here we just and again, I hate to say it, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I just don't think we really have decent enough actors here to really try to put enough of of their own good interpretive spin on it to turn, you know, poop into something more flushable, and it just, it just.
And and I think the other thing too that I probably would say is the music. Even though it's done by Akira Fukube, the way that the music was done, and also I think as executed within this movie, it just felt a little off to me.
Yeah, I agree too. Like you have opening up the film a reusing, slightly redone tune that was used in Destroy All Monsters when they're trying to destroy the what do you call it,
The moon base
the moon base,
or the Keelok
the
base.
mind control
Yeah,
device inside the moon. That's fine, but yeah, I agree. Like it's and again, unpopular opinion. I just thought Ifukube's score, well, he's still he's a good, talented maestro. It just somehow did not fit with this film. And I don't know if that's necessarily Fukube or if that's just the film itself. I some of the Godzilla music obviously does work well. I would say the
hmm
best moment that this soundtrack delivers, and again, I'm not necessarily blaming Ifukube. It could be just how this film was made. Was when we first see Godzilla officially come back, and he's making his way, and he's coming up over this hill, and you have the
yeah. On
Godzilla
Lagos
theme.
Island, that's what I was thinking about too. I think that's probably the best score execution in my opinion.
Yeah, I just that works out, I think, very well. Everything else at best is serviceable. And again, I guess I'm just actually I'm gonna blame more of the crew of the film than Ifukube.
More or less
Granted,
post production or
I
editor or
mean, I
something
guess
like that.
Ifukube, I guess maybe could deserve some of the blame because maestros are watching the movie as they're constructing the score. But I guess maybe Fukube could have privately said, "Look, this is utter crap. I'm just gonna kind of, do my thing here, and if it doesn't fit, oh well. I provided something good here." But yeah, I've always thought it just somehow did not work
Hmm.
either with this kind of film. It's just odd. It's hard to explain other than the fact it just doesn't seem to fit right with this film, unfortunately. And the villains, you got the guy who I've always called Larry from the Three Stooges. What's his name? Glenn Chico. And then you have Wilson. Like these guys are just complete utter buffoons. I just,
Yeah, they
and then
just
the
seem
fact
sort of,
too that
yeah, they just seem sort of full of themselves at the times, but then it also
it's not
they're acting,
believable.
yeah, they're acting, it just seems a little too over the top.
The thing too is that you look at the sets and you even look at like some of the equipment, like the helmets
Yeah,
and the guns,
yeah, some
it
of the sets
looks
it just
so
so cheap.
cheap.
Yeah.
Jinx. It it looks like something either you would see on the Sci-Fi Channel or you would see something that would go straight to home video. And I know a lot of people are probably hating on us right now. This is how we feel about this film. This is something that has always disappointed me about this film because again, you go from two really good, well-made Godzilla films, and then you immediately go from 0 to 5,000 with this. It's not a gradual progression into complete nuttery, and this is. I mean, if this was like, let's say, the last entry in the Heisei era, I would be like, okay, yeah, it's understandable why this film is the way that it is, and I
Hmm.
would be actually a bit more accepting of its complete buffoonery because it was a gradual transformation. Instead, like I just said, you go from 0 to 5,000, and there's no real logical explanation for this.
Hmm.
And the films after this actually pull it back from what is being done here. And it is mind boggling because even I think Toho knew, well, shit, like this was a
To me,
little too out there.
yeah, for me, I think it's like the black sheep in the family sort of thing. Like,
Well,
where
and a
it's
lot
like,
of people would disagree with us.
well, yeah, but like, just where, just how and when it was made, like after really two good movies, and then you got this movie, and then you got the other movies where it's just mellowed out. So it's like, sort of like,
It's
what's
jarring,
that?
is what it is.
Well, not, yeah, that, but it's like, I know there was another saying for it. It's like,
Oddball.
yeah, sort of the oddball of the family.
Yeah, and that's my like I said, it's placement within the Heisei era is part of the reason why I am. What the hell is he doing? Is part is part of the reason why I'm so frustrated with this film. Like I
Hmm.
said, if this were the 1995 film, if this were the film that actually ended the Heisei era, I would be like, okay, this thing is complete and utter nutso. But I would be more accepting of it because then you could see a gradual progression into this. Okay. A
Hmm.
lot of times, this is what you see happening in a lot of ongoing franchise. You see it happen with the James Bond franchise. It goes
And the
from something
MonsterVerse.
that is, kind of slightly, uh, more quote unquote grounded in reality, and then it starts kind of going off the rails once you get into the Roger Moore stuff.
And
Um,
then same thing with the MonsterVerse, where it started out just fine, and then gradually
yeah,
went
in
to where Godzilla vs Kong is.
right. I mean, it tends to be a progression. It's not something where you go, and it just it when that happens, like we said earlier, it reeks of desperation by a studio that thinks it's lost its grip on its property, which isn't true. Hi, no. Um, so, and on top of that, though, too, um, because, like you just said, the fact that Toho reined it in for the remaining films of this era, it shows and proves that Toho themselves looked at this film and were like, okay, like this film financially did a bit better. The effects somehow got an Academy Award nomination. And
Which is another thing I want to talk about too.
yeah, and but at the same time, we realize this is Knuckenfutz. it just, its placement within the Heisei era is so jarring. And this wasn't some sort of natural progression. That is
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons too. It's like, yeah, the space travel story, even if this were in place of Godzilla versus Destroyer, would still be completely awful. But at the same time, again, like I said, it would have been a progression. We would have worked towards this complete buffoonery. And instead, no, we go from slight, kind of more calm, cooler headed, slightly more grounded reality stuff to just like, no, we are taking a 4-year-old's idea of what a Godzilla film should be, and that's what we're gonna do. And it's just like, nuts.
And so, speaking of visual effects, how about those visual effects?
I will say this about the visual effects. I will say that a vast majority of the kaiju stuff looks good.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, but your computer type effects, no.
Yeah, for me, yeah, when it comes to some of those computer effects, like the ones uh, when they're in that flying time machine there, and then showing like the digitized things, like when they transport that actual time machine itself from one place to another, or Godzilla source from one place to another, and then some of the other visual effects there. Yeah, when it comes to those energy beams from Ghidorah and Godzilla, I mean they look fine as usual because it's been like that for many years
They're great,
prior.
actually.
Yeah, really great. I think it's probably one of the better improvements uh, out of both the 84 and Baialane at the time. But then, yeah, many years later, when you see some of these visual effects, they don't age well at
Well, even
all.
by 1998 standards, not even 7 years officially at
Yeah.
that point. You're talking 6.5 years. They didn't look that good.
Yeah, and I think there are probably some instances where we kind of looked at one another when it came to some of the visual effects, and we were just like,
Meanwhile, Jurassic Park, going on almost 30 years, still looks phenomenal.
oh
So,
yeah, yeah, just yeah. I got nothing, not really much else to say, but
let's go into the good parts, the kaiju
yeah.
stuff here. I really do love the design. Well, one more negative thing here. Um, the stiffness, though, of King Ghidorah's marionette when it's flying, no. And the Dorats look like friggin' treasure troll dolls. No.
Or like like thing one and thing two from Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, and then you have to add a thing 3 there.
Yeah.
Um, but the kaiju stuff, though, by and large, looks phenomenal. I love the initial battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah in this film. It is very brutal. It is intense, and it's just fun and entertaining. This Godzilla definitely follows through on what one of the characters said. This Godzilla is not friendly. We see that within this battle, and we see it basically throughout the remainder of the film. And when you fast forward to the concluding battle in this film, I love it an awful lot too. I would argue, though, this Mecha King Ghidorah comes off more stiff than the Ghidorah did in the initial battle. But it's still really cool because I remember when Trendmasters came out with their toys in like '94, we initially thought Mecha King Ghidorah was just something that was made up. That
Hmm.
Ghidorah was so popular that Trendmasters thought, okay, we're going to put a mecha form for Ghidorah. We didn't realize until actually seeing this film that Mecha King Ghidorah indeed was a real kaiju in the Godzilla universe.
Yeah.
And so I remember you and I geeking out over that because we were like, "Holy shit! Like, no, this thing was real." Like,
It's like, oh my God, this is true.
I looked at my Mecha King Ghidorah toys differently after that point because initially I kind of put them off in a corner, and I'm like,
Hmm.
no, and then found out no, it actually occurred. I'm like, buddy, like,
Well, and it's like the same, sort of like the same thing when the Godzilla Wars line came out from Treadmasters, that they did Bylane a little bit different, where they had it as a
right,
feat and
yeah,
then made it look a little bit more like a monster-esque, not just like an actual platform that we've seen in the movie. But
right,
yeah,
yeah.
when this came out, it was like, holy shit, Mecha King Ghidorah is in fact a real thing.
Yeah, and look, the miniature work kind of in that final battle too. You have some wonderful looking skyscrapers
Hmm.
surrounding them, and some of that stuff gets destroyed. Godzilla falls into some of it.
I would
It is
say,
a really fun ending battle.
yeah. When it comes to some of the miniatures, yeah, when you see some of the stuff fall, it does look a little bit fake here and there. Like especially when
Yeah, yeah. Some
King
of the
Ghidorah,
crumbling buildings are kind of meh,
yeah, it's
but
like when they run into that government, that was it, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building there. Um, but yeah, other than that, I really do like the battle. Uh, I think it's sort of better than the Bylane one up to that point, where
interesting.
uh, where I think it's a little bit more physical
Right, yeah.
at that time,
Yeah.
obviously. And then yeah, it's a really good fight, but also at the same time, it just didn't seem like didn't last that long, especially towards the end. But it sort of also at the same time, it made it feel like that they were, battling for a long time too.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my complaints with the Biollante film is that the fights were always too short. Um, I would argue that final Biollante fight seems a bit more visceral just because like it blinds Godzilla with its acid and then it tries to like bite its head off. The battles here do last longer. And I don't know if they would be more intense. At best, I would say they're maybe kind of on the same level, but you don't have
Oh,
anything that's like, trying to knock Godzilla's head
and then
off.
I think that this movie is also the one that sort of started off that uh, the whole thing called the Beam Wars, where you have both Ghidorah, well,
I would
Mecha
argue
King Ghidorah.
Biollante started that.
Um,
Because
well,
Godzilla, by and large, used his fire throughout that entire battle. The only time in which he went hand to hand was like, when like he had a vine through his hand or when he was grabbing like one of the small Venus flytrap appendages. Otherwise, he kept shooting his fire at Biollante.
yeah, I don't know. I think when it comes to both, when King Ghidorah and Godzilla use on their ends, you see
Well, yeah,
much more, and I think that's
the
in
Ghidra
my
can't
opinion.
necessarily fight hand to hand anyway.
Well, no, but he did eventually. He did, you know, stomp Godzilla. You know, when he was in that whole crevice area on Lagos Island and trying to do a little bit
Well, they
more
weren't on
physical.
Lagos when they fought there.
Uh,
It was in Japan. Because remember, they threw Godzillasaurus in the ocean, and then they realized they put him in another stupid story thing. They put him in an area where there's a bunch of atomic waste, and then that atomic submarine crashed into him, made him bigger, and then he came to Japan. They fought in Japan.
I thought it was Lagos Island
Lagos Island
initially.
was where they fought the Godzillasaurus when they went back into time into like 1944, and then that's where they left the Dorats.
Are you sure? Because I thought that
Yes,
they
I am
first
100%
encountered.
positive. Yes. They did not fight on Lagos Island. It was in Japan.
Let's
Because
see.
remember, we even saw that shot of Godzilla, like, I don't know, a couple hundred yards off in the distance, and in the foreground, you have cows mooing, like there was a dairy farm or something in one shot before he meets up with Ghidorah and they have their first face off.
Let's
They did
see.
not fight on Lagos.
I could have sworn that their first meeting is when they went back to Lagos Island. I
No,
could.
because after the defeat of Ghidorah, he goes on a raid, and I think was he goes to Sapporo or something like that, and then that's when he starts, city raid.
Well, what I'm talking about is the pre-Mecha King Ghidorah phase.
Yes, that initial fight. Yes,
But yeah, but yeah, that was as I think one of the only physical parts where Ghidorah actually did some quote
because it was
unquote
trying to
hand to hand
strangle.
combats. Yeah, and then of course strangling Godzilla in that fact. But yeah, other than that, I think it's getting to be more of like the Beam Wars sort of thing within this movie.
Well, yeah, and a lot of that just goes to the fact that the suits were bulkier, Godzilla's
A little
arms were
bit
made shorter,
stiff.
and just yeah, being able to successfully execute vicious physical moves like you could in the Showa era, that period came and went, and that is unfortunate. I'm not as big of a critic on the Beam Wars aspect as others. Do I get a bit sick and tired of it at points? Yes, but I'm not overly critical of it because one of my criticisms growing up of the Showa era was that I didn't think Godzilla uses fire enough. I thought there were many, many instances where if Godzilla had used his fire, the tide of battle in some cases could have been changed. And here he's using it more. And yeah, is it excessive? Sure. But I don't think it's as again, I think if the majority of fans are at like a 10 in terms of being hypercritical of the Beam Wars, I'm more at like a 7.
Mm-hmm.
I'm critical of it, but I don't think it's necessarily as terrible as some make it out to be. Do I want there to be more physical fights? Sure, but I understand at the same time the direction that they wanted to take with this particular era of Godzilla films to be more realistic ended up kind of handicapping them in
Well,
areas of physical combat.
they were trying to do more grounded stuff in the first two films, but then with this film
Then
that
they
just
came
kind of
here, and then they're just like after.
threw it out the window basically. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think outside the battles being the positive part of this, I think the overall thing, the both King Ghidorah and Godzilla and the kaiju battle itself, I think just didn't quite save the film overall.
I think, at least for me, in my opinion, and how I've looked at the Godzilla saga as a whole, um, this this for me at one point, and this was before Shin Godzilla was even a thought.
Mm-hmm.
This for me at one point was my least favorite of the entire Godzilla saga. And then I've watched the movies a bunch other times since then. This for me is anywhere between my third to fourth least favorite of the Godzilla saga. It sort of trades off with films like GMK and Final Wars. It kind of, depending upon my mood, it kind of switches around with those two other films. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. For me, I think it's sort of kind of in the below average. I probably wouldn't have it that far down. I probably would need to do some sort of like actual like list of my least favorite to favorite Godzilla films when
and
I'm
again,
done.
I understand we're not very popular with most people watching this right now. And you're probably giving us a thumbs down just because of this. Look, if you love the movie, great. More power to you. We just don't agree with you on this. Um, but I just this movie always soured me. And with some Godzilla films, I initially maybe didn't care for it at first, but with more viewings, I grew to like them more. That's never been the case with this film, nor Shin Godzilla, nor GMK. Final Wars, depending upon my mood, can sometimes be looked upon as something halfway decent. If I, again, like I said at the top of this discussion, if I turn my brain off and just in like whatever, the movie is entertaining as heck. But when
Yeah,
I think about it in the context of this came after two solid entries, and then the movies that come after this end up pulling back the punches that this one threw, that's when I start to get very angry at this
and
film.
and then it's like to me when it comes to whenever get the chance to watch this film, it's like I'm sort of dumb at first. It's like, yeah, I want to watch this, but then it's like, oh shit, it's that movie. It sort of gets to the point to where it's like you're in the middle of it. It's like, oh yeah, all this stuff happens, so it's sort of a bit too late.
Yeah, I mean, it's decent. Like when I watch it, do I have a good time most of the time? I mean,
It, for me,
I,
I
g-
think
I
I
mean,
sort of have an okay
I
time with it.
kind of do, but then there are moments in the film where it's just like, nah, this is boring or this is bad.
I think a lot of times that
It's
the
just,
thing that gets to me is the whole space time plot.
well, and then there are just some elements of the human story that are just part of it again is how the characters are written. They're written poorly. Um, and the fact too that the fact too that I just don't think the acting overall is good enough to make something out of nothing. That's part
Yeah,
of the problem too,
the plot and the over the top acting, especially when it comes to the future ends.
or just the lack of a lot of these actors being able to be talented enough, at least at that time, to put enough of a spin on it to add more personality to their characters.
Mm.
Um, one of the things that I've always disliked, and I know we're kind of going back to the whole disliking thing, I try to have some funny moments with Terasawa in this movie, and they are not funny at all. In fact, it makes him
It
look
just
stupid, and
it
it
just
makes this film worse.
well, and it also felt just really forced of them trying to make things funny in some of the
And one of
instances.
the things too that always has bothered me is this incestuous nature between Terasawa and Emmy. She flirts with him in the early portions of this film,
And
and he, you can
I
tell, has
remember
sort of a thing for her. And then, just as she is ready to leave after they defeat Godzilla, she goes, "We're related." And I'm like, what the hell? Like, don't you think this is important? Like, don't you
well,
think this would have been something that you would have mentioned sooner?
and I remember we had this exact discussion the last time we talked about this movie, and I remember that I think we ended off that episode of us just being so pissed off at this part. I
It is.
clearly remember about this
It's
discussion.
dumb. First and foremost, if you went the no kidding, if you literally go the entire movie without even hinting that they are related, why bother putting that in the first place? Or if
Mm.
for whatever strange reason you think this is important, then this should have been addressed much sooner. Because otherwise, what I just saw was fucking creepy.
Yeah, and I we should have talked about this. I sort of forgotten about that, but then I just don't want to open up old wounds again because we've also just discussed this in one of the previous episodes, and I think we should have just
Well,
ended
I
it right
know,
there.
and
But
this
then,
is something that baffles me that I think a lot of fans seem to just kind of forget, whether it's intentional or not, because
yeah, it's like
this is a
I've
problem.
sort of forgotten
This is a
about it until you
major
brought it up.
problem.
Yeah, yeah. One of the major problems about it is that they're sort of promoting one of the taboos when one of the future ends is flirting with one of her ancestors.
Yeah, and what would have gotten a genuine laugh out of me is after she would have said that, if they would have cut to Terasawa and he would have gone, "Oh," like, you
or it's
know,
like or it's like oh fuck.
or like,
like that Jim Carrey Dumb and Dumber
yeah,
expression.
yeah. It just the way it should have been done, because they went the entire movie without even hinting as this. It should not have been inserted at all. It means absolutely nothing other than the fact that she knew better, didn't care, flirted anyways,
Hmm.
and uh, just it
Yeah.
makes her look bad.
Well, it's like whoever, I'm not sure if the actual writer did insert that because
Yes.
they could have had some revisions from other writers. So I'm not sure if it's his or
Yes.
her his own
Yes.
doing, or if it could have been another
Yes, it is.
writer's doing from revisions or something of that part.
But
So,
again, this baffles me that nobody talks about this. Nobody does. I've never seen anywhere on social media. I've never seen it on forums. I
or maybe
have
on
never heard it at
panels.
G-Fest.
Yeah.
This is a problem. This is a problem here. It just ugh. Like,
Well, let's
he could have been her what would they come from? 2302 or something like that?
or
Like the 22nd century. They come from
yeah,
like 23 something.
22nd or 23rd, which of those? Yeah.
So like he's a great 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 great
Probably
grandfather or
not
something to that extent.
probably not that many generations.
But yeah, I mean, but he is far back. You know, that's like us meeting a relative of ours from
The Revolutionary
like the
Era,
19th century or something like that.
or
You
maybe
know,
the
like
18th
early 19th
century. Yeah.
century. You know, and it just no, like this is a problem. And I know we gone back to the negatives, but this was a point that I just got reminded of because my brain's like, look, this is a problem. This needs to be addressed.
And yeah, it's like I just totally forgotten about it. And yeah, we've talked about it, and I think we should. Yeah, this is probably something that we definitely need to gripe about and try to put it out there a bit more and try to let others know that this is sort of a serious problem within this movie in and of itself. Like probably the biggest controversy out of the entire Godzilla franchise, in
Well,
my
then a lot of
opinion.
people are be like, well, it's not that big a deal, yada yada yada. I'm like, no, it is, because she flirts with him at several points in this movie. There was at one point where Terasawa asks her something to the effect of, "Well, why do you like it here so much?" And she turns around, she goes, "We're here," and like runs off. She giggles and runs off. If that's not flirting, then I
I
don't
don't
know
know
what
what is.
is.
Yeah.
That is very much like teenage girl flirtatious actions there. But I think we need to wrap up
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
30
So
years of Godzilla versus King Ghidorah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Let's just end it right there and just sort of give it our overall sort of rating from here.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like I said, if I turn this film off, by and large, I have a good time because it's stupid fun. But even then, every time Emmy goes, "We're related," I am completely like that's a very stand up. What the hell did I just sort of hear type
Yeah.
of moment? Like that jars me out of my stupid fun time that I'm having with this film. Um,
Yeah, even if
but
you have your brain turned off, then that part's gonna bring you back
that
to
cannot
back
escape.
back to reality.
But yeah, like otherwise, though, I mean, look, again, when you really take a look at where this movie sits within the Heisei era, and at the same time, when you really think about the story and just how this whole thing was constructed, it is whiplash inducing. It is also mind numbingly just a mess. It truly is a mess of a film. And it disappoints me because I'm willing to go with a lot of crazy, stupid shit. But this one takes it to such a level where I'm just like, I cannot get aboard this ride. And this is one of my least watched Godzilla films. I really do not watch this movie that often because even though I love the kaiju scenes, I think the kaiju scenes are done very, very well. And again, I want to stress that these are some of the best in the entire Heisei era. They are very well executed. I'm not trying to be super negative or whatever you want to call me, because I by and large don't care for this film. I do think the kaiju moments are very, very good and sort of prevent this film from being a complete and utter dumpster fire of a film. But it still comes very close because there's just not enough of the kaiju stuff to really save this film into even becoming average. And that is disappointing about this film. It's disappointing that after two wonderfully written, semi grounded films that you decide to jack everything up to 5,000 miles per hour. And then after this, the remainder of your films, you kind of pull back some more, um, but not as much as you do with those first two films of the era. It's it tells me that you knew you made some errors with this particular entry. And then the fact, too, that this sits kind of within the middle ish early half of the Heisei era, it makes it that much more baffling and more aggravating for someone like me because I know where this film sits in the era, what came before it, and what comes after. Again, if I somehow just did not know the order of these films and all that, I probably would look at this film and be like, yes, it's stupid fun, but it's actually pretty decent because I would assume this is a later entry. I'd be like, yes, it's stupid. It's got a lot of holes, but this is sort of what happens. But then, yes, after I find out, no, this is the third entry in a 7-part Heisei saga, I would be like, you gotta be kidding me. Because you have these two films over here, and then you have these other, you know, three films that come after this. Excuse me, these other four films that come after
Yeah.
this, and yeah, they're goofier than these first two films, but they're not batshit crazy like this one. What the hell? And again, like I said, that is a huge problem. Like that to me adds a heaping layer of problems to this film. And it's so disappointing because the Godzilla design is wonderful, the Ghidorah design is wonderful, the kaiju moments by and large are just incredible. But everything else that's wrapped around it just is not good. These are some of my least favorite characters out of the entire Godzilla saga. They are definitely a lot better than what we get out of Shin, though, and even GMK, and maybe Final Wars. Again, that sort of depends on my mood. But uh, I cannot endorse this film. I know this is very unpopular. I'm still trying to understand why so many people like this film. I have a theory on that, and I think it holds some validity to it, but I just am not entirely sure if that is the full case as far as why so many seem to enjoy this film. If you're looking for a stupid good time, this is a good film to do that. It's one to really laugh at and maybe have a few beers while you have some friends over. Um, but this is such a jarring, jumbled film in the Heisei era. I cannot really endorse it. There's been always been a part of me since the moment I first concluded watching this film where part of me has always thought, I wish this was not part of the timeline. I wish this thing could be excised from the entire uh, Godzilla saga. And, you know, I hate to say that because I do love this character. I do love this series, but this I think does a complete disservice to the character and to the entire saga in and of itself. You want something that is a complete and total embarrassment to the Godzilla saga. I think first and foremost, Shin is kind of that way, but this is kind of the next step. It's kind of in that next grouping of Godzilla films that really, I think, gives it a black eye periodically. And yeah, in an ongoing series like Godzilla, where you have well over 30 films, you're going to have some stinkers. This one, sadly, though, comes on the heels of two great films and then comes before four films that, yeah, some people don't like Space Godzilla, but seems like the other films by and large are decently received by fans for the most part. Um, no, I can't endorse it. I can't. I have to give this. I'm giving this a 2 out of 10 for the kaiju battles. Um, like I said, the kaiju battles save it enough from being a complete and total dumpster fire, but it is still awfully close.
Mhm.
And the kaiju battles are the only things you really have to see out of this. Everything else is
Mhm.
skippable because, first of all, none of it makes sense and none of it is any good.
Yeah. Yeah. The only yeah the only good thing about this movie is the kaiju battles. Uh, the sets, the miniature sets, they're the practical effects, and then maybe just a tad bit of the visual effects, mainly coming from the monsters with their beams and everything. But other than that, with everything wrapped around the kaiju battles just really can't save this movie. And if you're looking for like the Batman and Robin version of the Godzilla franchise, to me, I think that this would be the Batman and Robin movie out of the
I would say
entire.
no. More of the Batman and Robin movie is Final Wars. Final Wars is even crazier.
I probably would consider that as the Batman Forever.
But Final Wars, like I said, depending upon my mood, there are times in which Final Wars is like, okay, this is slightly more palatable.
I I would watch more of Final Wars than this movie. Uh, with with that being said, just with that controversy that you had to just bring up, with the whole flirting, the ancestral thing, yeah. I think with that, even if you're trying to turn your brain off, just
Once
if
you reach the final 30 seconds, it's like, wait.
yeah, even at that point, it's going to take you out of that, turn off your brain point, and then you're going to probably be forced to analyze the entire movie at that.
Thanks a lot, movie.
Right
Now
then
I got
and
to
there.
reconsider your
Yeah,
entertainment value.
yeah. You know, with that, uh, most of the visual effects, the characters, the acting, the story and the plot, Yeah, just where this movie is placed within the whole series, it's mainly the oddball of the family. It's as what you said, Ken. It's just going from 0 to 5,000 miles per hour, or at least you're going on a nice smooth ride, and then all of a sudden hitting a freaking brick wall out middle of nowhere. That's sort of to me what it feels like when you go from watching some of the two great first entries of the Heisei era with 84 and Baialane, and then you go into this. Boy, I feel sorry for you. Even for both of us. It's just a very jarring mess of a movie. I'm sorry. And I think Kent explained it best. But yeah, it's very, very, very jarring movie. Very, very messy. And out of 10, I would at least have to give this. Well, I would say at best 2.5.
Yeah, I know this is not going to be a very popular um, panel here. And like I said, if you love it, hey, that's great. Don't let our opinions and stuff deter you from your enjoyment or anything like that. This is just what we think. But hopefully, at
Mm.
best, maybe we've gotten you to
Maybe a
um,
little bit
re-
more informed. Yeah.
to sort of just take a different viewpoint,
Mm.
and you don't have to agree with it, but to just at least look at it from the side of people who by and large don't like it. And so
Or
hopefully,
have at least sort of, kind of delved in a little bit more into it.
yeah. So we hope at the very least you enjoyed this particular panel. If not, stick around. We more than likely will have something that you will enjoy. So hope you have continued to enjoy Daikaiju Fest up to this point, and thank you so much for watching.
All right, we'll see you guys in the next panel. Take care.